Hi, Kate. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Lauren. It's so lovely to be here.
Okay, so before we get into all your practical tips, I'd love to have you introduce yourself to listeners, tell them a little bit about who you are, what you do, and kind of how you came into this profession.
Oh, thank you. So, I'm an executive communications coach, which kind of means that I work with people individually or in cohorts within companies to really help them work on their influence, their persuasion, and their cut through. And my particular area of passion or expertise is working with really high achieving women. So, it's a total joy.
What first got you interested in studying likability? Like, was there a moment or an experience that made you realize just how much it shapes our success at work? Was it like you were coaching these women and likability kept coming up? I feel like that could maybe be a thing.
I think it's one of those things that I learned early in my career. I finished my PhD and I went straight into tech, which was like whiplash of the highest order, right? It was from a very slow world to a very fast-paced one. And I kept noticing people would comment like, oh, you're so happy or you have a smile on your face or something. And I felt super diminished and kind of infantilized by those types of comments. Like, why is everyone commenting on this type of thing? But what I realized was that we think that being likable is somehow this backhanded compliment, right? Like it's the least kind of baseline thing that I want to be. But actually, it is quite powerful, right? Being likable definitionally means I want to be in that person's orbit, right? I get happy when I see I've got a meeting with that person coming up. And historically, I think in my own experience, people who found others likable advocated to have them on their team or advocated for them to get promoted. And it was a really important part of progression. And so it might feel like a backhanded compliment, as it did to me, but actually I realize there's a lot of currency in it. And of course, we can all be very likable in different ways, but I think understanding the power and the currency of likability for sure helps propel us forward. And that's what I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I'm also very interested in that, but I also like really relate to the story you said because yeah, I'm thinking in my own experience. I want to work with people where I'm like, I enjoy working with you. I like working, like that's probably how you say it in your head. I like working with this person. So it's interesting to have sort of the reframe. I Okay, I want you to also preface to tell people like about your book because I wanted to start with the basics of like what does it mean to be powerfully likable, but also your book is called Powerfully Likable. So maybe what does it mean and why did you feel so strongly about it that you also wanted to like call your book this, write a whole book about it?
Yeah, so my own first experience with this was I ended up being a world champion debater, which I know is like a nerdy thing that mostly I don't
Super
tell
cool.
people. But I was always the only girl on an all boys team or the only woman on an all male team. And I thought really long and hard during that time and really ever since about how do I balance these different parts of me, right? The authoritative, powerful, aggressive part that can run a really strong argument and win, but also the rest of me, right? The person that I identified with. And I began to realize that we tend to think of these two notions, power and likability, as different doors you can walk through, right? And once you've made the choice to be one, it feels like you can't be the other, right? I can be Miranda Priestley only, right? All authority, no friends, or I can be this sort of likable, amenable person. And I realize that's just not an acceptable dichotomy, right? We don't have to have that choice. So I think the book really came about by me thinking, how many places within that, on that spectrum can we show up and embrace parts of ourselves, right? All of the different parts that may feel super ambitious, super driven, but also really communal or compassionate. It doesn't have to be impossible for those two things to mix. So the book is really about the idea that you can mix power and likability, but that also you can mix a lot of other things that might feel dissonant, but actually can show up as really powerful drivers of leadership.
Yeah, and that matters at work, I feel like, because I feel like the best people or the most successful people at work are just very adaptable. Like they're powerful when they need to be, they're likable when they need to be. Like I've kind of realized, your analogy of like walking through the door, it's like actually you need to be walking around with like a tool belt all the time, and whatever door you go through, you know what tool to pull out, right? Something like that.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say toolbar. I feel exactly like that. I think I use that word in the book, which is not everything in here is going to resonate with everybody, but I want to think about it like that toolkit that you, in those moments where you're like, oh, there's nothing I can draw on, or what do I say, or what's the comeback I need, what's the new language I could use? You have something that's like, aha, this might be useful here, and let me try and let me experiment with it.
You talk about something in the book called micro moments, which I love that word, of communication. Can you share an example of a tiny moment that builds trust or influence at work? And, as specific as you can make it, because everybody's trying to do
Mm.
this at work every day, I feel like.
Ah, yeah. I might start with one that actually undermines your trust and show you how you could fix it. So, a lot of women I see, particularly, men do this too, but I think it is a particularly feminine behavior. We often accidentally undermine our own self and our work. And a really good example of this is something I call in the book imposing syndrome, right? We fear making an imposition of whether it's asking for time or resources or something from someone else. We get very self-conscious about it, and so we do a bunch of different things. So a really good example is that we minimize time. So we'll say something like, it'll just take 2 seconds, or can I grab 5 minutes, or can I just pop by your desk? Right? These are teeny tiny little moments. We think, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be a problem. And what we're inadvertently doing when we do that is we're not making ourselves look important, right? If it's only going to take 2 seconds, it can't be, a breakthrough. And we're making the actual ask look unimportant, right? Nobody ever solved this big important thing in just popping by your desk. So a really interesting reframe of that type of thing could be something like, hey, Lauren, I'd love to talk about, the Q4 budget. I've put some time in your calendar next week. Let me know if that time works for you, right? It's a subtle reframe. It's asking for the same thing, but we're actually giving the ask and ourselves importance, right? It deserves us sitting down and having a talk. And that's a really interesting reframe that I think both helps change the way we treat ourselves and our projects, but also it's coded for seniority, right? It's not coded for junior people. Junior people will say, oh, I just want to ask you a quick question and jumping by and popping in, right? Senior leaders will say something really different. So it's a very different way of framing exactly the same thing. So these changes, I think, are really, really easy to make and yet can have quite a profound moment on how that person might view the entire project you're working on.
Yeah, I absolutely have done this many times where I've felt, and I've even had it where like I have a standing one-on-one with someone, and if I don't have enough to talk to them about, I'm like, oh, I don't want to waste your time. Like, I don't know if we need to be having this one-on-one. So even in that scenario, it's like I'm undermining, like, why should they be talking to me? I have no influence. I'm not a senior enough person, right? So something, what about like in an example like that, if you,
Yeah.
I'll just use my example. Like if you have a one-on-one with a senior leader and you're like, I whatever. I don't know. You don't know what to talk to them about because maybe the stuff you are doing you feel like is too low on the totem pole for them.
Yeah, so one, I think it's such a great example. So one, you could use it as a chance to recap something, right? Or talk or do a deep dive on a project. Hey, I know we've got 30 minutes today. I wanted to spend 10 minutes just on a deep dive on project X, or make sure that I'm allowing for any questions on project Y, right? So you could sort of focus it that way. Alternatively, sometimes there are those meetings where you're like, you know what, I only want to take 15 minutes with you today because I know we've met earlier in the week, or you were at that, group meeting earlier today. But in this 15 minutes, I want to do A, B, and C, right? And they will respect you. You haven't diminished yourself. You've actually been respectful of their time, but you've foregrounded it in a way that's like, let's make this really useful and I'm out.
Yeah.
And that's always super appreciated by people who are like, oh, great, I've got 15 minutes left to catch up on the email or whatever it is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's good because I don't want anyone feeling like they have to spend the whole 30 minutes just because that's what they blocked off. So,
Exactly,
um,
exactly. Yeah.
I think a lot of women also worry that focusing on being likable is going to make them seem weak or like a people pleaser, which is, got this negative connotations. Like you want to be likable, but you don't want to be a people pleaser. How can we balance maybe warmth and strength in our communication with, these stereotypes or what we're maybe overly concerned with?
Yes. I work with a lot of people who self-identify as people pleasers, and I actually have never well, I don't think I've ever been one. Um, I've always been in service of what's useful, what the work needs, and being really transparent with my boundaries. So you can be absolutely likable, in fact, even more likable if you are very transparent and clear about things. So I would love to be able to help you with that. I don't have any time for the next 2 weeks, but if it's something we could do, then let's have a talk, right? If it's your boss, it's a little bit trickier because sometimes that's, you have to be doing something. But you could say to your boss, that sounds really exciting. I'm going to just give you some visibility here. These are the 4 things I'm currently working on. How would you like me to prioritize that? Right? So that's being like you are being open to what's being asked, which a manager would see as a likable trait, but you are also being super clear about like, there's only so many hours in the day. Here's what's on my
Yeah.
plate. How can you help me? So I think I'm really glad you brought this up because I think a lot of people mean, oh, likable must mean sort of acquiescing to everything and being super, hyper obedient. And actually, likable is often just being really clear, right? Being very transparent, looping back to that email saying, you know what, I'm so sorry, we couldn't make this work. The budget fell through on my end. I've so loved having this conversation. Can we please stay in touch? That's
Yeah.
a perfectly likable way to say I can't do the thing, right? And actually, as someone who loves having loops closed, I would much prefer that than just silence, right?
Same. I'm like nodding my head because I'm like, I'm obsessed with the fact that like you just brought up, like, if you would just close the loop, that's very
Close the
likable.
loop.
Yeah.
Just tell me where we are. It's so good.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like people, to your point, like you have this, you're like, oh, I can't give you what you need. So therefore, I'm just going to not respond or not close the loop. And that's so much worse. So, yeah. And also, I
So
think from
much
like a
worse.
professional reputation standpoint, close the loop. Like, this is,
Right.
yeah, much better.
Or also a really interesting one. I had a call with a woman the other day and she was asking me to come speak somewhere. And she was like, look, I don't know that we're going to have the right budget for it, but here's what I wanted to talk to you about. And in my heart, I was like, oh no, this is going to be really awkward. How are we going to make this work? And she said, listen, I can't get all of the budget you want. Like I can get 80% of the way there, but I've got this like hotel suite we can offer to put you up in, and you can bring your family. And also, we can do this, and we can do this, and we can do this. So she was really coming at it from a here are all these other things that you didn't mention that I could offer that could make something work. And I thought about both how powerful and likable it was. She was really, really trying to make something work for me, but she was also really clear and upfront about what she could offer.
Yeah.
And it honestly, it's made me say yes. It's made me say, amazing. This sounds like a wonderful weekend. So I think sometimes we fear we get so hung up on, in her instance, like, I don't have the budget, or, I only have X. And we can kind of think about, like, if I was to be creative here, how might I be able to make that work? I think that was a beautiful example of exactly that.
Yeah, I really like that. I feel like I've said this on the show before, so sorry for everyone listening, but in toddler world, they're always like clear as kind, clear as kind. And it's all about setting clear expectations with your kids and clear boundaries, and I think about that a lot. And like being clear as kind, like saying to your point, saying it right away, like this is where my boundary is. I don't have that budget, but I have this other thing. I completely agree. I'm kind of curious too, in your research, what do powerfully likable people do differently during those tough conversations, like giving feedback, or I mean, you just kind of gave an example of saying no, but let's talk about giving feedback because I think that one is really hard and it's a thing that comes up in the workplace a lot where even if you're not maybe giving feedback, maybe it's like you don't want that person on that project or you don't want to like whatever it is, maybe it's not even direct feedback, it's just sort of like this isn't going to work. How do I let you know that?
Yes, yeah, it's such a great one, and it's key, right? Like we all have to do it to some level. I talk a lot in the book about how being calm is a superpower. And I'm a very big believer. So, having done so much debate in my life and seeing how your energy, and I'm not very woo-woo, but I'm going to use the word energy, that your energy is very contagious. And we know that in work, right? If someone shows up very agitated or anxious, we immediately think, uh-oh, especially even if their face is looking worried and anxious, we immediately start mirroring that and think, oh, what's coming? What's happening? The best and kindest way, I think, to give effective feedback is to be very regulated yourself. So to be very, very calm from the outset that like this isn't something, even if I have been up late, sleepless at night, worrying about how to tell you this, this is something in the moment that I am coming to you with the best calm self that I can muster. And there's probably a toddler analogy here too.
I was gonna say there definitely is. Like you get on their level, you don't match their energy. Yeah.
Right. But honestly, I mean, God, what toddlers can teach us about the workplace.
Yeah,
But
they are tyrants, so there you go.
100%, 100% little autocrats. So one of the things, if we can really regulate that and to be able to have that conversation to say, Lauren, I'm so glad we get the opportunity to talk about this thing. I need to give you some feedback about this. And it's going to be a little hard to hear because I know you've been working so hard on this, but I really want to make sure that we're aligned and that we can move forward. I'm going to need you to move you off this project or that project for these reasons. And you can be empathetic, right? I know that's going to come as a surprise, or I know this isn't exactly what you're expecting, but here's why, and here's what I want us to do instead. And honestly, if you can be regulated and help regulate or co-regulate them through that conversation, and essentially keep that momentum going, show where you're moving to. Don't let it sit with like, you're off the project, goodbye, if you can help it, right?
Right.
Oftentimes it's like, I need you to move over to this, but here's what I want to spend the meeting today talking about how we can get you set up to succeed on A, B, or C, right? So calm and then momentum is a really nice way for people. You'll often find people coming back to you and saying, oh, that was really helpful, or I hear that. Um, the other thing I would say is you cannot eff effectively control how anyone will react. So all you can do in that moment is show up the way that you will be proud of and you will be happy with the effort you have given. And then it's up to them to take it or not take it. It's not enough to worry about that outcome to not do it in the first place.
Yeah.
So I really concentrate firstly on like what needs to be done and how do I actually manage that in a way that feels really effective and good. And then the rest is kind of they will do what they do.
Yeah, I feel like you just said like a really important thing in the workplace, which is like worrying about their outcome is not enough to not do the thing, right? Like the right thing to do is for you to follow through with what you need to say and the job that you need to do. And you can't, you can do your best to deliver the news in the best possible way, but you can't control how they're going to respond. And I do think that, if you deliver it in that way, you will build confidence and influence and likability, and you will have a lot of these good things for your reputation, regardless of how they respond, because they're going to go back and be like, but the person did deliver it in the most respectful way or whatever it is. I'm kind of curious. You mentioned being calm. Are there other like nonverbal or like shifts that you can make with your body language that you have just seen to be really powerful? I totally relate to the calm. I think also I've heard like being quiet, so not talking the whole time, which I know when we're all nervous, it makes us feel like we have to fill up the space. So like same thing and then stop talking. I know is really important. What are some other ones?
Mm. I think what we're talking about here is how to code for seniority versus not, right? You'll think about all the senior leaders in your workplace. I'm sure the listeners have them in mind. They're unlikely to be hyper frenetic and fast talking and anxious coded, right? They're not going to come up in front of an all hands and be like, "Oh my gosh, you guys," right? It's not that energy. They're channeling a slower, calmer, I am safe hands, right? So I often think about, or I often use the metaphor of how can I demonstrate that I am safe hands? How can I demonstrate that you can throw me something tricky and I will not always say yes, right? But I will catch it and be able to tell you what to do with it. That's what leaders are looking for. They're needing to know, oh my goodness, thank goodness I know she's got it. She's across it. She's demonstrated that to me. Sometimes that's going to be something like a weekly email or pinging someone to let them know you're across something. But in terms of what you asked, in terms of like physicality, oftentimes it's like really nice eye contact, like especially if you're in person. I know Zoom is a little weirder, but even so, like full attention on Zoom,
Yeah.
in all the other tabs where it's really, really easy. Like be very present as much as you can. If you're in person, maybe you're a smiler. I'm an inveterate smiler. I smile, smile all the time. And I'm fully aware of all the implications of telling women to smile. So this is not that. But like showing that you are present and warm and understanding is something that I think a lot of people underestimate. And actually, again, if we're thinking about on a very animal level, how I leave feeling from a meeting is
Yeah.
very indicative about how I feel about that person and by extension their work. So I think we can take a really good opportunity to have that moment of connection, and it can go a really long way to making a project feel more palatable or be closer to the person.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you just shared some nonverbal, but then you were like, there's some other verbal things you can do. Like, I want all the tips. So whatever, any
Okay.
other tips you have for, especially in the workplace, it's like so much stuff is coming up that to your point, like acknowledging their email or their Slack message or something like that. So what are some other tips you can do to go a long way to show like influence, confidence, good communication skills? I think like probably there's been a bunch of people, I've had this too, where it's like communication on your performance review is like a whole section, right? And some
Right.
of us get scored really high, some of us not so much. Like, so
Yeah.
how we're communicating, letting them know we got it, influence this too.
I think it's such an interesting question, and it really is so context dependent. So it depends, and I will say this as someone who identifies as a little bit of an introvert, I'm professionally extroverted. I in my early in my career, and I talk about this example in the book because it's really stuck with me. I was in a meeting of very, very senior people and my peers, and we were presenting what we were going to be working on. And I felt in that meeting, my functions. Ideas and actions were represented by a colleague of mine. So I didn't contribute in that first meeting. I was listening intently. I was super, super engaged, of writing hundreds of notes, and I came out of it feeling really good. And at the end of that project, months later, one of the VPs said to my boss, "Oh, Kate did really well on this project. I didn't think she had it in her." And my boss asked, "What made you think that?" She said she didn't say anything in that kickoff meeting. And it was such I mean, the reason it stuck with me, 15 odd years later, is that I remember being very thoughtful. In my mind, I was being so thoughtful. I didn't want to be repetitive. I didn't want to waste anyone's
Yeah.
time. Probably a little bit of imposing syndrome, right? Like I don't want to take up that space. But in my mind, I felt like it had been so well represented that who was I to want to say it again? And I say this because this is, I think, a very good example of how sometimes there's a really big disconnect between the optics, how people perceived you, and actually your intention or what you were doing. So I want to remind people it's not that you're being a bad person, right? Oftentimes you're being super thoughtful or you're listening hard or all of those things. But try to understand in terms of that audience, what can I do to demonstrate that safe hands? Is it something optics? Is it saying absolutely yes, let me take you through what my team's doing? Or is it something like sending a follow-up email or being really responsive on Slack? You'll kind of start to know that stakeholder's preferred mode. Had I known now what I had I known then what I know now, I probably would have realized that leader in particular was very extroverted. She thinks out loud. And so if I'm someone who thinks inside my head and then I share, the final thing. So I would have said to her, "Hey, I would have loved, like, this is what I'm going to be doing." I would have given her the outline. And then I probably would have looped back with her after that meeting and said, "Feels like you've got a lot of really good like ideas around this. Let's put in 30 minutes and I'll make sure I get a download from you so I can, run really fast, in the direction you want me to be going." I think she would have really appreciated that. So the answer is to think about those optics, to not beat yourself up because you've probably got really good intentions, and then to try and understand that leader or, that group of leaders kind of love language or
Yeah.
preferences for, how they like to show up and think about how you might want to be flexible and try that. I think that's goes a long way to help.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I also really want to just like echo your point about like what's their quote love language. It's like, what's their communication style at work? Do they love like a Friday recap of what you've done? Like, do
Yes.
it. Put the reminder on your calendar. Is it that they want you to speak up in the meeting when you're in the meeting with senior leaders because they want your voice heard? Do it. Yeah, yeah. I think that's really important because everybody is a little different and kind of finding your style and finding their style and finding a way to compromise those two things. So in your example, like maybe it wouldn't have been speaking up in the meeting, but it's certainly following up afterwards, right? Like that would have been a really nice compromise of the two things.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And even just honestly introducing myself at that meeting, right? Like everyone was going around and saying things and I again was just I was probably one of two people who didn't say anything and it would have been really good to say, "Hi, I'm Kate. I'm looking after this. These are my goals.
Yeah.
This is what I'll be doing." Even if it took all of 2 minutes, would have been a really well invested 2 minutes.
It's funny. I work in a fully remote company, so everything is Zoom oriented. But and so even though it's like it says your name to reach out, it's like, well, they must kind of know who I am because, it says my name in the Slack channel, whatever. My boss always starts our meetings with like new groups with us doing a round of introductions. And look,
Mm.
sometimes you're like, oh, we only have 30 minutes. There's like 8 people on this call. But I realize like it goes such a long way in letting people introduce themselves and giving them a little space to say like who are you, what are you working on, what maybe like what are your focus areas or something like that. And I've started to do that. Like I'm kind of copying the thing that she's been doing in the meetings and realizing like, oh, this actually sets a really positive tone for now. People have kind of like been able to check that box and now we're able to move forward a little bit better versus like my natural reaction is like, okay, we're all on the call. I want to make the most of these 30 minutes. I don't want to spend any time and to your point, I have a good intention. I don't want to waste everybody's time, but also the intros go a long way. That's what I've realized.
They do, and not only they're serving a practical purpose to your point, but they're also serving a psychological one, which is if we speak up early in a meeting, we're more likely to speak again. So that's especially important if you have someone who is quieter or more junior or more worried about speaking up, if you can get them to speak early or encourage like that as a norm, they're much more likely to sort of jump in later. And ultimately, that's what you're wanting to foster an environment that does that for everybody, right? That no one leaves a call thinking I should have said or I didn't get a chance to say.
Yeah.
So it's a really clever strategy.
Yeah, the other thing we've been doing is our team meetings always start with a icebreaker, and
Mhm.
we switch off who's the person coming up with it. And then we'll kind of like time things, like okay, two people will debate something. It's like okay, let's spend 5 minutes debating this thing, and then at the 5 minutes, it's like okay, well, parking lot. And I know these are all like jargon terms, but I find it's a really effective way to get people to your point talking, maybe talking earlier, feeling like they're able to share. Yeah, it's just like little tidbits that I've noticed. Every time you get a new leader, they all lead their team meetings differently, and it's just like I'm like these are really good. I really like this. And now I'm like now there's some psychology maybe behind this as well. I didn't even know that.
Yes. Oh, and the other thing you're talking about, which I love, the putting a time limit, for example, around the debate, is that you're doing really good signposting, which to go back to your previous question is a great way of demonstrating I'm in control of this, right?
Hmm.
Like if I'm running that meeting and I'm saying, here, we're going to do 5 minutes to do this, and then we're going to do this, it really helps everybody. Everybody loves a signpost, right? You
Yeah.
think of a long car trip, you love seeing what's next. It's Tahoe in 20 miles. Like it's important for us. And so the more you can do that, the more other people are like, oh, wow, and my anxiety goes down because you're running the meeting. You've got control over this.
Yeah, people definitely like knowing who's in charge and who's running it.
Exactly.
Um, okay, since you've studied this for years, I've got two final questions. One, what is your favorite secret communication tip that you personally use all the time? And then I'll ask you the next one next.
I have been using this for a long time, and it's actually not in the book, but it probably should be. And it is the idea of saying, thanks so much for telling me. And why that can be a really powerful phrase is that it immediately shows empathy, right? You're appreciating someone, but it's actually not promising that you will make an action or a decision on anything. You're just immediately saying, I really appreciate hearing that thing. And it gives you a beat to either come back to them with something or to work out what your next step is. But it's a very, very effective way of helping the other person regulate if they're coming to you really anxious about something or worried or sharing something personal. Thanks so much for telling me is just I come back to it again and again. Side note, I also use it with my children. So
Yeah.
to loop all the way back to the beginning. But I think it's a very, very helpful way of showing empathy. And I obviously I mean it, right? So there's a genuineness to it too. But it also helps me take a moment to work out how exactly I want to move forward or what I need to do next. So that it might be a useful tool for folks listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I these are the terms that I absolutely love because it's like that will be burned in my memory and now I will say it and I will feel so good after I say it because it will kind of buy me time with my thoughts. I will
Yeah.
validate how that person feels. I will show empathy. Like these are all the things I'm looking for. And sometimes you just need a couple phrases that you are like,
Right.
I use these continuously and I know to pull that out when it's helpful. So I love that. Okay, if our listeners try just one thing from your book to become more powerfully likable this week, what should it be?
Oh my gosh, it's like choosing between my favorite children, Lauren. There's so many things. I think I suggest at the beginning of the book to do a bit of an audit of your own power. And it's a really easy thing to do. So I would say that might be a fun thing for your listeners to do is think about in the coming week, say, where are the situations and conditions at work that you felt really good? You walked out of a meeting or an interaction and you were like, ooh, that went so well. I'm so happy. Like you're giving yourself a bit of a high five and start kind of keeping a list of those things to work out where in which you feel like you are thriving. And similarly, keep a list of the opposite. When you walk out of something and think, oof, that did not go as planned, right? I did not show up in the way that I really wanted to. I felt wrong-footed, whatever. Write down what happened. Write down what the conditions were. Were you underprepared? Were you alone? Were you whatever it is? And what we do is I start thinking about, and anybody who I coach, let's find more opportunities for us to be in the former column, right? Where we can do more of that and feel into our own sense of being whatever, however we conceptualize being powerful. And then also let's work out what we want to mitigate because those non-powerful situations are going to keep coming up. And
Yeah.
so, what can we do that we feel more prepared for them when they do? And I think that's a great start to start thinking really intentionally about like where are we currently and how do we want to meet that?
Yeah, and like intentionally, proactively directing, how you want to show up, how your influence looks, your likability, all of those things. Like we talk a lot on the show about proactively driving the direction of things, and I feel like that fits very
Yes.
nicely into that.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think it's such an interesting, we don't often take the time to do it. So it's
Yeah.
an interesting exercise. It might reveal something to yourself about your job, about your trajectory, about your own emotional state. So it's a very, very helpful exercise.
Amazing. Dr. Kate Mason, so good to have you here sharing all these amazing tips. Tell people where they can learn more about you, follow your work. Your book is called Powerfully Likeable. I assume it's wherever books are sold, but you let us know.
Yes, yes. It's coming out September 9th of this year, 2025. The best way to otherwise find me is my website, katemason.co, and you can find links to my socials and things. I write a lot on LinkedIn and a newsletter as well.
Amazing. We'll put all of that in the show notes. And thank you again for these amazing tips. They've been super helpful.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, Lauren. Thanks for having me.